We have a couple of.
So Robert is on.
Yep.
I'll hang out for a few minutes to see if she.
Yep. And supporting, you're gonna keep going with the other option we're done.
Yep. Can I show you how to shut it off? So from this screen, you'll go to these dots and just hit stop recording and then end meeting.
Okay.
And that's it.
Perfect. And
then just shut off lights and
shut it down or leave it.
it doesn't matter.
Sleep.
You can shut it if you want.
Okay, or it'll sleep.
It will. Yep.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
I do. Yep. Okay, from meeting to order. Recorded.
7:03.
Yes. Zoom. Public. First order is approval of the agenda. The listing I have changed is running business and it's adding our 2024 budget, which I just talked about a little bit. Added that the bottom, if you will. And we do all that after our meeting with the guest speakers. Again, we can do the same thing in the minutes moving down to after our meeting with our group. For wastewater discussion. Other speaker from Oakson, Rob Carmanian. Rob?
Yep.
There. Yep, thank you for joining us. And Hannah with us yet?
Not yet.
Hannah will hopefully join us. She's Hannah Stokic from Mondine Freshwater Consultant. She was with us last month, and she was going to help again speak tonight and for Q&A kind of format. Her son came home sick early, so from school, so he may be late getting on, so couldn't come live. So we'll start with Rob. Rob, thank you for joining, and if you want to introduce yourself and what your company does, we'll just kind of jump in on a question and answer format.
Yeah, so my company is called Oakson, and we are the New England distributor of the Perkrite drip dispersal system. Basically, it is a pressure distribution wastewater disposal system that utilizes modified irrigation tubing instead of PVC pipe with holes drilled in it as the interface into the soil. We work in all 6 New England states. The technology has been in our region since 2005. It has been a patented wastewater disposal system since 1990. So it's something that's not new, neither to the region or as a product in general. And we have systems, northern Vermont, northern Maine, coastal Connecticut, Nantucket, and everywhere in between. So thank you for letting me join in on tonight's meeting, and I'm here to answer any questions as it pertains to your community's needs.
So we asked you to join because drip system has been introduced to us from our engineering. We have an engineering study going on right now, Rob. That
Tie and Bond?
Yep, Tie and Bond.
Yeah, I've been working with them behind the scenes, yes.
Okay, so you are familiar with our project or not?
I am. So I started talking about this with the engineers in 2022, and there were a couple different sites that were being vetted. And the last version that I worked on with them kind of mid to late summer was Spring Hill Farm site. And I think that's probably the main focus as of right now. Is that correct? So yes, so I am somewhat familiar with the project. Just in context, I'm working probably with 7 or 8 different Vermont communities right now based on the grant money that was awarded to the different communities. And it's perk drip dispersal has been a very popular option with a lot of these small community systems. I have not seen the 60% design plans if they've been submitted to you yet by the engineer, so I can't speak to those specifically, but I did provide them with some preliminary layouts and whatnot for zones and needs to meet the IDR regulations.
When's our next 60% supposed to be?
We don't have another scheduled one yet. And I'm still waiting for nope, we had one last month.
Yeah, okay.
Yep. So that was the 60% presentation, but we don't have one scheduled for the next phase yet.
So where we're at, Rob, is we're trying to just, as a planning commission, we're just a committee just trying to, not committee, but we're trying to find out more about what we can do in our community and are there other alternatives. And for example, your drip system, have you ever done anything in conjunction with the living machine systems and using plant filtration?
Only once. It was it was a smaller system. It was on an island off the coast of in the Long Island Sound called Fisher's Island. And they had a yacht club, and it's a very environmentally sensitive area. The Long Island Sound is wrought with wastewater pollution they're trying to solve. So they needed to utilize something like that in conjunction with my system. So yes, I actually have placed the tubing over. And may not be the living system, that brand, but it was like a similar like wetland type of situation where they would grow the vegetation stuff over it and have recirculation and whatnot and reintroduce it to the plant life there for polishing of the pollutants in the waste stream.
A couple of questions. Worked on that's somewhat similar to that.
I can't hear this person at all. Sorry.
Okay. There a site that you worked on that's somewhat similar to the graphic notes.
So projects that I've worked on that's similar to Grafton. So we've worked on projects that I'm just concluding a project right now that it's 10 times the size of Grafton in the community of Windham, Maine. It's 320,000 gallons per day. So to me, the type of system that I provide, it's scalable. So I can put one in your backyard for your home. I could do one for municipality. So it works essentially, it's the same tubing that distributes the wastewater. What changes between a small residential system or a smaller community system or a large community system would be the tanks required to store the wastewater, the size of the final discharge pump. It's a bigger force main in diameter than, a smaller system. So probably the closest comparable right now in Vermont that's going on right now is the town of Montgomery. We're basically going to bid right now. So it's already been approved and plans done, and it's going to bid this probably right after the holidays. So similar size to Grafton, maybe a smidge smaller, maybe are you guys about, was it 42,000 gallons per day, I think, from my last notes? Is that about right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Correct.
this is maybe a smidge under. So really it's, you know, in Massachusetts, I probably have, you know, 5 or 6, right around 40,000 gallons per day. But to us, it's sort of, there's a range, right? So when we get to say 20 to 60,000 gallons per day, it's common equipment and methods of installation. So I would say comfortably, you know, 15 to 20 active systems, you know, in that range.
What is the difference? Is it just in the actual distribution and but at the end of the day, it's the same basic process? Unlike unlike the plant system, it doesn't, your system doesn't really, look for the plants, it could work with them. What is the reason?
You're going in and out. The microphone isn't good. I'm sorry.
I want to understand what the difference, what really the fundamental difference between the Oakson system and basic drip dispersal.
Okay, so so like a soaker hose system or something like that, or a regular.
My PVC, my understanding is.
Oh, between PVC pressure distribution and the Oakson system. Okay, so the Perkrite system that we distribute in New England is a package system. So it is pre-engineered to an extent where it's incorporated in the Vermont rules for discharge with no treatment prior to. So we can discharge primary settled effluent into the ground in Vermont with the system because it's an engineered system. So we supply the full suite of requirements, the controls to tell the system when it's on or off, to what areas the effluent is being discharged, size the pumps. We provide what's called a hydraulic unit, which is a piece of equipment that is inserted after the pump and before the drip dispersal zones, where it provides final filtration of the wastewater to allow it to go into the ground through irrigation tubing without clogging. So there are many parts to the system that have been vetted by the state agencies that to say that, yeah, this is not just you know, soaker hose coming out of a pump. It's a very highly engineered system that has safeguards and protections and redundancies to make sure that if the treatment or anything you need to work on upstream isn't doing its job, that we're not clogging the field. Because as we know, the most expensive parts of wastewater systems is the excavation, importing of fill material, all that site work. So if you clog your field, now you're at, you know, at square one. So we provide a lot of safeguards to make sure that what's going into the ground is not going to clog along the way. There are many other reasons why this is a great system, and it's more when you introduce wastewater high in the soil profile, there's a lot of bacteria in the aerobic zone, which breaks down wastewater before it gets into your water table. So drip dispersal is generally installed at only 12 inches below grade versus really deep in the soil where it is anaerobic and you get a lot of biomat, and eventually, you know, they all clog eventually. But because we're in the upper soils, it works a lot differently, and then the soils are rejuvenated by the oxygen transfer through the natural processes.
In Grafton, Spring Hill is about a mile and a half from the village and 300 or 400 feet higher. Does that pose any particular problems?
No, lift and distance is not a problem. It's an engineering question. So when we look at a site, We work with the available soils and size the amount of area required under the IDR regulations. And then we work engineer in reverse. Okay, we are 2,000 feet away. We have 50 feet of lift. What size pumps and things and force mains we need to do to distribute that to the site and get it in the ground? So that's not a concern whatsoever.
Paper, are you saying it's not in traditional treatment of work using their system versus
Right. So our system is approved to work with just a septic tank, settled quality effluent, all the way through membrane bioreactor type of treatment plants. So it's really, and it's because of that final filtration that we provide to make sure there are safeguards that we're not sending slugs of solids or whatnot out to the distribution network in before it goes into the ground. So of course there are environmental questions, right? There are, if you're near if you have an aquifer nearby or other things, you might need to treat the wastewater prior to discharge. But in this case, we handle all strengths of wastewater that are approved under the Vermont code.
if you're looking at upper level flow, the pumps freezing it, the job is.
I'm sorry, the connection,
You said that you're working in the upper level of the soils.
correct, yes.
You don't have a freezing point?
No, so what happens is the what's ever in the pipe drains at the end of the pump cycle. So the force mains are installed below frost. They have vertical risers that feed the pipe, which are insulated. It does its dosing cycle. And then when the pump shuts off, everything that's in the pipe drains into the soil and it's empty, ready for the next dose.
How deep are you going into the main line?
So the main line, so that's going to be a determination by the engineers and the site contractor. You know your area and how deep frost drives down. You know, certain areas are different than others. You know, so whatever is recommended by the engineers and the site guys. Typically, minimum of 4 feet. Could be deeper. That's not a concern. You know, we're experts on the beginning and the end, right? Whatever happens in between a force main is a force main. So we'll allow those who are experts in your area to determine what the frost depth is and what the typical frost depth is, and make sure that we're protected from that.
How large of an area do we need for ours? We aware of that for the third 42,000 gallon.
So systems of that size, what typically happens is there's the soil conductivity analysis. So they actually study the soil, see what's going to happen to the groundwater below, see how the soils, how quickly the water moves through soils. And then the engineer says, we can load it at, 1.2 gallons per day per square foot. So they say this is how much water can physically go into a square foot of soil at the Spring Hill Farm site. And then we take that number and apply it to the Vermont rules. And you have your 42,600 gallons a day. And then you divide it by that loading factor that the engineers gave, and that's how much area you need. Now, there are other things to consider under the Vermont rules that they require a 100% redundant area. So for a duplicate area, and that's a rule in the IDR regulations, not a rule specifically to Perkrite. So we just follow along with what the code states. So the layout that I provided to Ty and Bond for the Spring Hill Farm site incorporates enough area to meet your 42,600 gallons per day based on that soil factor that the engineer provided to us.
Was it about 2 acres? You recall?
I don't recall because I give it to them in small zone sections, right? So we have a large area. It was like L-shaped, if I recall, okay? The extents. And then what we do is say we need this much amount of tubing to be compliant. And I gave them shapes that would be conforming with the type of zones we have to build and say these need to follow contours. We just kind of drop them into there, following the natural contour of the land to minimize any type of mounds or anything like that. So the total cumulative amount could be 2 acres. That sounds a little high, to be honest with you, but when you take all the little pieces and in one big one, then sure, it could come close to that, but that seems I don't really look at it as acres. We look at it as square feet segments to meet the requirements of the code.
Now, when we speak of zones, all the zones are pressurized at the same rate, or does one zone go off? Next one might go off for the next cycle, or they?
Yes, a very
Yeah.
good question. So it's designed to rotate the flow throughout the zones over 24 hours. So each zone will be hit numerous times over the course of the day, but the whole area doesn't get charged all at once. So imagine you send X amount of 1,000 gallons to one area, and then it has 3 or 4 hours to rest. So you're never saturating the area. That allows that microbial activity in the oxygen-rich soils to break down the wastewater. So you have multiple zones. You can keep the pumps smaller because you're not, I'll call it 2 acres, even though I'm not sure, the exact number, but you don't need a pump to charge 2 acres of pipe. You need a pump to charge like, 1/3 of 1/4 or 1/6 of that. And then you rotate through. And over 24 hours, all the wastewater gets distributed, not in one slug. So we use the whole 24-hour day to get rid of the wastewater in small doses throughout all the area.
What are the maintenance requirements of something like this?
So I'm sorry, say again.
The maintenance requirements.
So what's great for this is the requirement is you are going to just check the operational status of all the parts. So typically on a new system, you can either hire a company, a Vermont-based wastewater, operator, or we can train your town staff to look at the system. So basically, there's no greasing fittings or anything like that. You're just checking to make sure that the float switches are registering, the pumps are meeting their pressure requirements, valves are opening and closing. I would say at a minimum it's once a quarter. So every 3 months you would have an operator kind of kick the tires on that. In the beginning you may opt just for a little bit more. And what Oakson provides is that we build into the package that we're going to come up the first few visits or have our Vermont rep, there as well to make sure that the understanding to the local staff, carries on, not just that first training period, but the first real maintenance visit. And then, after, every year we may have additional training as new staff comes on board. So it's a very comprehensive approach, depending on your community needs. Some communities have, pump systems for collection through different parts of the town. They already have people on the town maintaining those. So it's not hard to get them up to speed on a technology like this. There's no magic. It's a pump and it's a valve that opens and closes. Float switches to say, hey, we have water in the tank or we don't have water in the tank. It looks more complicated on paper than the reality is on how it works. It's just a really smart way of packaging up the ability to rotate zones and to have filtration and things. When you deal with wastewater, you know, you can't control where everybody puts down the drain, but we can try to, you know, put safeguards in place to protect the ground that it's going into.
What can you grow above the system?
Typically, you want to have vegetation, right? So you don't want to have sparse, because that would introduce the chance for frost and stuff to kind of penetrate the area. So if it's not, so we back up for a second. The large community system that we're doing in Maine, they're building soccer fields and baseball fields above it. So it's going to be a play area for schools in the community. It could just be a natural wooded site, right? You could just let a field mix grow and let it grow wild, and that's fine too. You could have a beautiful lawn. You could have it amongst trees, right? There's existing trees, we can work around them. You don't have to clear cut everything unless there's a reason to clear cut because you have to mound it up a little bit because of groundwater separation for the state code. But you can, you know, generally you're not planting vegetables and things. You're not growing crops above it for human consumption, but it's some sort of vegetative cover that, you know, if it's going to grow wild, you know, maybe cut it down once a year just to provide access for any type of, you know, maintenance inspections or whatnot.
You want to make sure you're maintaining your microbial activity in the upper system. Whatever's growing there, so.
Yeah, so that grass and all the nitrogen and stuff is going to be soaked up through the grass. And you know, not to put the cart before the horse, but we did a pilot study about 5 or 6 years ago in Peru at Bromley Mountain. They were looking to do some expansion and they had to meet a very stringent phosphorus removal, and we were able to meet that. Then COVID happened and I think their plans changed, so nothing has been built yet. But there are a lot of benefits with introducing wastewater in the upper soils at a very low application rate. The folks at DEC in the especially the IDR department, they really understand this technology very well. So you're going to find that as if you pursue this and you go to the permitting stage, they know how this works, and they're fully supportive of the other communities that are choosing this as their option. So this isn't going to be something that they're going to be like, whoa, what's this thing that you're throwing in front of me? It's the exact opposite. They know it, and they're expecting these. I've already had special Zoom meetings with the whole staff to train them on all this stuff with Q&A over the last 18 months.
What's the projected useful life cycle?
So you have parts that are going to wear out, right? Your pump is going to last so long, right? The solenoids that fire the valves are going to last, 5 years or whatnot. But the most important part is the field. There are systems that have been installed in the early 90s in Pennsylvania that are still active today. The very first system Oakson was involved with that was installed in 2005 is active today. So we haven't quite met the life cycle yet on the actual soil absorption part of the system. Pumps and floats and things, those, it's like, just like your car. You can drive a car 300,000 miles now, but you just, take care of, the parts that need to be replaced over time, and it'll treat you right for a long time. I lost you. I didn't hear you. Yes, the efficiency, the pipe efficiency stays the same, so that doesn't change. because there's no clogging or whatnot of the pipe. The pipe efficiency remains, within, 3% of original startup design. So it's very, very efficient over time. You don't get diminished flow per se in the pipe over time. It maintains its application.
And a question on the field again, how do you monitor the profile of that field? You know that you maybe have a problem.
So you don't. So what we have is we have a flow meter installed that we know what the prescribed flow rate is for zone 1 or zone 7. So when it's built and we test it on day 1, we get our prescribed flow rate. 10 years from now, we can check that same flow rate for that same zone. If it's hitting its target, you don't have a problem. Perhaps it is running too fast. Maybe somebody went out there and dug a couple holes, or put up a volleyball net or something and broke a line. Well, you'd probably see it getting wet, right? Because it's only 12 inches and it's coming out of pressure. So you're probably going to see it get wet. But you don't have to, we don't watch the soil part below. We understand that we're maintaining our correct flow rates and whatnot, then the tubing's performing. If there were situations where perhaps the engineers or whatnot underestimated the strength of the wastewater, right? Maybe it was a very high BOD. There was a restaurant that went online in town, and it was spiking certain things, and maybe the biological characteristics of the wastewater were causing issues out in the field. That would be something that is it would be surfacing of water, because biologically it couldn't go in the ground anymore. But that would be the case for any type of wastewater system. But we don't have like inspection ports and things that you would have in stone-based infiltration systems. There's just nothing to see because it comes out one drip at a time.
So if one zone fails, you only have to repair that one zone.
Exactly right. So that's the great thing, right? So if one zone had a problem, you could divert the flow to the other zones on a temporary basis while you make a repair in place of that zone. It's only 12 inches down. So it's not hard to repair. It's not a major excavation project. Okay. So yeah, that's a good point.
And could you theoretically have multiple sites on one system?
Sure.
So
I mean,
one zone-
you could have one zone, here, and another zone 2,000 feet away. Absolutely. We do it all the time.
So have you seen the profile of our village?
No, I've not
No.
seen any of the I very rarely see any of the collection aspects of systems. I deal with the tanks outward, and that's it. I don't do
No, just curious. In a small village, there's 5 homes and within what? 10 acres? Could you have 2 or 3 zones on one side of the village and 2 or 3 zones on the other side?
Sure.
But it's the site of the issue.
It sounds like that, a lot of these community systems, there are some parts of town that are very hard to get online, right? Because of distance or cost, because there's very few remote ones. So the cost to extend that collection line to them becomes astronomical. So, but if you're saying, oh, can we make a zone for them? No, it has to make its way to the final discharge tanks, right? Otherwise, you'd be doing a very small system for them and a larger one for everybody else. That's probably not what you have in mind. Could, you could do it that way, but.
No,
Well, I'm sorry, you know what? The town of Montgomery could not get all of their sewer collection in one shot. So they are building two systems. Two separate collection systems that go to two separate tanks and whatnot for the purpose of getting in the ground. It was very close to a 50-50 split. So it made sense to do it that way. But if you're talking like 95% of the community is able to get on and the 5% not, sometimes that isn't the numbers just don't work for for the poor people who live on the 5% side.
One possibility is that we have a cheese factory that's on the edge of the village. Probably a quarter mile at least away from the. And that could be part of the system. That's, a significant cheese producer and with waste product.
Right.
Like that for them.
So what you would need to do is they would need to have their own retention tanks and whatnot on site to knock down the strength of their portion of the waste stream before it goes into the collection system. Similar to like a restaurant or something else where you'd have grease traps and whatnot, you would have to treat them as an individual before it enters the collection system. Otherwise, it's, changing the makeup of your waste stream. So that's a separate engineering concern. So any non-residential strength wastewater that you want to enter your community system needs to be looked at individually before you send it downstream. That's just prudent wastewater engineering practice. Nothing to do with me. Just saying that's the prudent approach.
If you wanted to add to the system, say a brewery came into the village and wanted to use the wastewater system, that would really upset the apple cart, right?
Yeah, breweries are interesting for many reasons. You get the byproduct, and then also there's a lot of high strength flushes there. There's not a lot of for guests and whatnot. I have a couple breweries, and they had issues like knocking down the strength of the wastewater because it's everybody, drink a lot of beer and it's got to go somewhere, right? So the strength of the wastewater is extremely high. So they almost had to figure out a dilution to knock it down a little bit before enter the waste stream. And then the byproduct of the brew shouldn't be really introduced there at all. That almost they need to pump and haul the byproducts of their brewery. The chemical makeup of that is just, it would really damage your soil. And with any wastewater system, not just mine. So again, that's an individual question. If you want to permit a brewery to come into town, then they're going to need to do a little bit of something local on their own site before you let them enter the waste stream. But that might be a better question for your engineer. But just, my 2 cents.
So do most breweries have their own system on site? Or what do they do? They can't just jump in on municipal either, can they?
No, is it just the bathrooms of the brewery you're considering, or like their byproducts?
So they're byproduct.
Yeah, that's something, so that would be something that the code would address, right? So the IDR code. So that's non-residential waste. That's different than what we're talking here. We're talking what gets flushed, what you wash your hands with, not byproducts. That's a different aspect of the code that you would have to address no matter what system you decide for your community.
Curious what some of these microbrews are doing that pop up everywhere.
Yeah. bet you they're doing something on site or pumping and hauling their byproduct.
Yeah, that's it.
That's what they do on the breweries that I'm affiliated with, that all the byproduct gets pumped and hauled.
Mhm. It's a little similar to the way the seed.
Kathy wrote a few questions in the chat there, so I'll just read them out, and if you could jump in, that would be great. Her first question is, does Vermont have grants that accept your systems? And how is the system managed for a town after it's installed?
The answer
Right.
is
Yeah,
Yep. So the grants, you know, there's not any specific, you know, I'm an approved wastewater system under the Vermont code. So any grants that go to community wastewater, it would be applicable. Okay. So we meet all the standards that in order to fulfill the grant requirements. So whatever, American Iron and Steel standards, American products, all that stuff, whatever needs to be done, we meet that. As far as the second question, we talked about that a little bit. You know, we're not gonna, you know, we have operators in Vermont that manage a lot of these systems already. You could hire them. If you wanted to have your town staff learn and be the sort of the routine check people, that's fine. Or we also have a combination where you maintain the Vermont operator, train operator on a retainer, and they can come in and assist as needed. So there's many ways to make the arrangement work for your community needs.
okay, that's great. And then her other question is, what are the positives of this system versus a traditional town system? And do you know what the price differences are?
So I can't speak to the price differences because we only do what we do. I don't know how much, and there are, you know, dozens of different types of wastewater systems. The benefit of our system is that by placing the wastewater high in the soil profile and rotating it throughout the day, gets the best effective treatment before it gets into the groundwater source. So it's a proven fact. We have studies on it. And there are those other safeguards we talked about with filtration and other things to help protect anything that should accidentally carry over from the settling tanks into the pumping tanks, prevent it from getting out and clogging up your field and your soils.
Thank you. Anything else? Rob, thank you very much. That was extremely informative for us. Could we invite you back at some point later?
Yeah, I'm already so another community in Westford, we're doing 3 of these meetings and it's open up to the whole town too. So the town sits and they go into for a bond vote. I don't know if it's Westford or Westbrook. I get them. It's one of the two. But I'll do multiple meetings as needed, and even ones that you invite when, you know, residents, if you need to get their input, that's, you know, that's fine as well. You know, more open meetings. So whatever we need to do is fine.
Yeah, that's what we're trying to do here. We're trying to have some, you know, informational meetings for ourselves as a commission and, you know, following up on this engineering report and what the report is telling us what we need to do. And then we're also, you know, looking at these alternatives. I mentioned about, you know, the living machine.
Yeah.
Type idea, but, you know, it's not sanctioned by the state yet, unfortunately.
I wonder how those work in the winter.
Well, we do need to be either greenhouse or the last meeting that I guess the school code from evaporation. If they would do evaporation,
Cause the one that I was affiliated with on Fisher's Island is only a, 8-month-a-year system, cause they shut down the yacht club, off season, so it doesn't run during the winter. So that's why I was just questioning.
This company was recommending or suggesting what to do is, mimic at least October weather in a
Oh, okay,
large building. And you mentioned there was some sort of evaporation to reduce the amount of water that had to go into the system.
okay. That's
So-
interesting.
And then we're thinking of, how do we use plant cleansing, process to limit the amount of waste that's going into the system, such as a drip system. Can we reduce the area that's needed for these fields by running it through some plants first?
Sure.
And that's where our other speaker hand was good with. She's very much into pond restoration and wastewater or water management. But it's the same thing. It's water management is wastewater management and water management kind of go hand in hand.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
But the plants are doing the work. They're using a natural process in conjunction with some of these systems. And that's where we're at. We're trying to find out, is there another way, if you will.
Sure. All right. Well, I'll be happy to come back with, as you have, more questions, or as you're starting to narrow your selection, you have some more detailed questions. Perhaps we can even, review, some of the, specifics of the drawings and whatnot too.
Great. Well, thank you for your time, Rob. I'll reach out to you again. If you have other questions, we'll let Rob know. Thank you. Thank you.
All right. Have a good night, everyone. Thank you.
Thanks.
Matt,
Yeah,
can I ask a question?
yeah.
I know Robert just got off, but I was curious to know more about what the soil consistency was for a town that did a sports area for the kids, like a soccer field or a play field or a ball field. I know that was mentioned way back, possibly at the one of the first meetings of using the village park. Is that still off the hook in terms of using that village park?
I think it's the perfect spot for it. You can create a field up there, you can have it go out into the forest, you have a zone out in the forest, and it's town property.
The problem was
What might come down because they're misinformed. Misinformation. People aren't getting the right information. And if they would come to these meetings and hear it from the experts, they'd understand it.
the element that we feel is time bound and not, you won't hear, why are they able to?
I think it was shut down by some folks in town that probably said, no, we can't go there, so I said, no, let's go in the direction. I'm not sure. That's just theory.
I could be wrong in the thought that I think they meeting a year ago.
can't hear anything.
And the, Franklin Pond.
It didn't, you're right, they didn't work. Yeah, that's right, they didn't work, but
But that was a different. System.
I believe it was. So,
We're thinking,
I can't hear anything that you're saying, that Ron's saying.
Ron's saying, what about the lawsuit? You know, improve that. Obviously,
why this is, it's just because Kathy, do you hear me now?
You have to really shout for me to hear you. And I'm not sure, it's really the system in the town that's not picking up really. You gotta be by that owl.
What I was saying is that the Village Park and Grafton Pond turned out not to perk. I understand it, that's the issue. That was in terms of thinking of a traditional system.
Yeah, but now you're looking at this type of system. Would the soil system work?
We don't know, but you know, that's.
I think that's something that needs to be looked at. And I would love to see this soccer field and baseball field, you know, in person to see how does that work? And I don't think we should just not accept because it's not perking. I think you need to really look at all these other avenues that you guys are looking at. That's just my that's where I'm coming from.
yeah, we need to keep on with, and just because it didn't work the first time, maybe it'll work the second time, so.
Well, he had said that he's worked with time on, so they can do anything in her for that. But they decide against something. I want to.
From the drip dispersal. No, but they didn't explain what he did.
Well, they never sound
Bring
well
this
as
up.
traditional, and I'm so
Thank
some
you.
were traditional, you know, leach field. What I heard.
Hearing that the connection to the Time Bond is very recent. And maybe reached out to them as they saw what was happening, not happening here. So it could be it's a very recent connection, but I don't know.
They were using every time, the time bonds are one thing. Because they're pretty in that. They talk about traditional, network. Right? Somehow or another, either town bond certainly didn't mention anything about this. I didn't want to put them on the spot, pitching them or whatever, but clearly, we don't know what time bond. Arrangement, and therefore perhaps really could be usable in one of these sites that if you just did the standard traditional system, like those parts wouldn't work.
The other number I thought I heard. Maybe take a year for me.
Now, the numbers they were throwing around at that meeting were, they're just, that's.
Well, that's the other thing, you would need another, grant or bond the same size that you have now, to get the price of the parking.
They wanted to go through this water. But we do a system about.
Not talking, we do it all.
No.
Well,
You know, who's being realistic? Time bond being realistic or?
and I know I'm throwing a lot out there, so I'm covering you late. But the other thing is on the, you now they have to go we kind of start again, we have to,
Sure, because guess what? Grant continues.
yeah.
The grant continues.
What the thing that sound like to me is there's gonna be another 30% to put out on that, to catch up. on the-
Plan the grant being. You hear us, Kathy?
I can hear you, Matt. And
Oh.
I think, I think the other guys on the other end of the table, again, you gotta be near where that camera is.
But the same distance for-
Don't unplug it.
You don't give any detail on that. I actually asked them, how. I didn't see a project. How we did it. $4 million. Yeah, but. Those were complete for. How we.
So how does the action?
We do not.
I mean, I'm not saying that they're saying that somehow the town did that.
We should take a look, we should take a look at the system. But, no, I think there was something, again, it's very vague, but honestly, kind of. Trying to skirt things, they were saying things like. There are amounts of money. They both. So that even if the argument is. What I was saying, that the town itself, if the village. itself, who would be the main users of it, would be responsible for the cost. It could be that. Don't lose it, don't. If you're getting around some. It's not safe.
And then they're getting, role. It will be a little, good for the numbers, maybe a potential.
One of the things about all this is that, at some point, if we don't have an idea of people going on and looking at things, you're looking at that's from locally, no matter how it's paid. Yeah. That's the town budget.
Kind of crazy. The numbers.
It's really hard to tell. I think the contract to the client. And I know we just one big number and not tell how to do it. It's called the tax. But I'm not sure why or does the select board have heard of them? I am.
There's almost, they only have 60%. Right, Kathy?
I just heard part of select board. What? I didn't hear all of it.
It's kind of hard getting the select board more detail on the financials, because there was just this big number without really any breakdown of, how we're getting there.
How to fund it.
So we only know what the 60% report shows. That's all.
Right, but it wasn't a cost break.
It wasn't a cost breakdown. That is the next
Right.
step.
Right.
And where's the select board at right now? What have they decided to do? Break on this
They're-
or?
They want the 90% meeting to happen. And then go from there as to, you know, and have it, the town has to vote on this. But I think before they have any kind of vote, they have to get the funding, like how they're gonna fund it before it goes to a vote.
Yeah.
It's all gonna depend on, I think they're worried about, we've got that bridge repair that's gonna be up $8 to $10 million to do that. They have to float a bond for that. They don't want this on top of it. And then you've got people in town or on the outskirts of town that won't use the system. Why do we need it? And everything seems to be okay. It's worked for the last 80 years. Why can't it work another 80 years? Why do we need a system? So you have those people to kind of convince. But if a system breaks down, the town's in trouble. Unless people get their own system for their own home and hope it doesn't compromise the water system of their neighbors.
You know, that's one of the issues, there is no system now. It doesn't exist.
Different legals.
Yeah, but there's no system for the village. So, any breakdown is an individual breakdown. And I understood from Karen, you had one breakdown. That's no.
No.
Then you go to home, had an issue.
Number 18.
That's okay, but that's the key.
But the homestead has failed once. It can't fail again because they don't have anywhere to go with the system they have now. I don't know what's going to happen if that fails. The other big question mark, the foundation has said they have a 5-year plan. What happens after the 5 years for the town, and what's going to happen to that foundation? I mean, in 5 years, they could just say, I don't want to do this anymore, and somebody else comes in. They may have something, a whole different plan for that building in the town. I mean, those are some things that, are on the back burner that we need to think about.
What you're looking for,
This is, yeah. I don't remember what all.
Yeah.
The least expensive one was the town. Hopefully. Drinking water.
Another option.
Yeah. But what, really, then there was this whole other thing. So limit to how much. Done. Somebody for the. One of the villages.
I can't hear you.
It should be. Well, either make it. Some filling, some of. People, but building, so. People want to talk to people. So just continuing, you want to see what the director will be running this again, wanted to hear Rob Sumanian and the grid system. And you could have explained a little bit more about what she does. Right. And I'm still of the mind that if we can somehow sweeten that water before it goes out into the field, we can bring up the side of the area for the steel. No, and what kind of cost is that? And then if we can put it in an area where you can put a sports that, it doesn't work on it. Where you drain over the, we can, underneath the steel, it's gorgeous. Utilizing the space for recreation.
Yeah, really, so. We got the three alternatives, were either just the strict dispersal, or just the drinking. Wastewater, that's a running, and then that was. And then there's a common.
Did we get any sense of cost from anyone else?
No. No, she basically spoke about
I
the
asked,
concept.
I asked her, she said, I don't know.
The bill is cheaper than.
Number of homes in the village, Kathy.
What?
We're looking up the number of homes in the village.
There's 70? Or am I thinking of the ones that you tested the water of? You should have that, you should have that map in your, there's a map there with all the little red dots of where the houses are and where their septic and water is.
So there's 70, and you just. I think the foundation, the end. Totally they'll take up half the cost. So, I think we should keep it going. They said. I just know that also. So. The 6 million, yeah, 6 million bucks. And so 3 million is shared by these 70 homes.
So it comes down to follow what's maintenance. If you follow what the state wants, what the state dictates you have to do, price goes up. Here's no, we go to Google, price goes up. Here's no regulation, price goes up. You follow that, price goes up. You know, they need to reduce, you know, take the restrictions of it, do something. Maybe it's time to be more safe than. What can we do? We can't afford it. We need something, we can't afford that. So you need to, okay. Give us a leeway here. Is that ever going to happen? How do you approach it?
56 residential. 60. from the time on. Oh. And. Foundation. Kind of like 3 or 4 million. When I keep on thinking about it, and some of them say, no, that's not the way you're doing it. And it's like, once the data, oh, once and of course, they just take it and have to.
Well, I think
Getting into the tanks at the bottom of the hill.
Olson's number is in the time bonds, because he said, time bond what they need. And they plugged it in, plus their markup, plus the state markup.
And the time bonds with the foods. But getting the food from all the homes and the sites. So it's like a ballpark total cost. Okay.
It hasn't been done, put up there yet. So now you take it over the project, put it up, out contract. And as soon as they know it's $8 million job, they're gonna come in for $8 million. Tell me a $6 million project, they're gonna come in.
No, it's 20%.
The hopes and the numbers are not going to be our own.
One way or the other. Basically, he explained.
I want to know what's required to. All that. I would certainly not feel like these. But what do you do? No, I mean, I have one of the. Oh, what,
No, the problem, the big problem. There's no funding.
yeah, but that's what you're gonna.
No, here's the thing, you get it from.
They wanted to hold out.
As long as you include them, that, because this is the way we have to go. The funding would,
You really got that idea that it was just, that it was quick. I mean, I got to trying to make it hopeful.
Every day you're saying that. Prove to the state that you exhausted all of your other options. If this is something else we're looking at.
Now, a couple of questions though. For funding, you mean that the funding is reduced outside of when you can be. They would say no. That's not. But they don't have.
I don't have anything. I don't have anything local. No, I don't.
One thing to know. Living system like we said, that it's so much cheaper that even if we can't get. It's another issue. What I would. Everything is almost the same. So we need to talk. Everything together, all everything. So. That both of the basically. Exactly the same. So that's the word you're going to first or go to. So. That's why yesterday, you just dumped us off the there. So. That little system. it's actually something. Totally opposite of you. Let's say it makes sense to go. Oh. It's not a solution. Spend some time, losing money. I rather. I can see you, go ahead and look like that. And have it. 60, 60.
I'll move on to, September meeting minutes. Did a great job with that. Yeah. With your support. Yeah. The adjustment there, so. Motion to approve the minutes. On favor? Yep. Unfinished business. New business, I'm adding, when you decided tonight, but, yeah, about our planning commission budget. I talked to Kathy the other night. Okay, when is our budget supposed to be sent in?
I don't know the exact dates, but I know the board has 3 meetings set up in November. So I would make sure that the planning commission has something in writing for the board. So it can be on the budget to be presented. Check with Morgan on any specific dates that, or Kim.
Yeah.
Because I know you have to have it for the town meeting book that's given out before town meeting in March.
Well, my budget has been 2,500. Yeah, I'm just trying to not really more spend out of it. But I told Morgan, saving, some of her pay for what she's doing for us, it's not our budget. I mean, that's one hand, one the other, I guess, but. Still, we use her for our services. So, and, we go check out the systems and Caribbean. That was up to Frank Hill, they right up. It's beautiful what they was done up there. I'm not sure if he's going to, with that thing on there to start. Up at Spring Hill. Where the site is, right? Thinking about it, it is the L-shaped open area around this whole It's very slow. And, I think it would. Less than the available property. Well, can we go back to today, not that because of wastewater, but do we have them relook at part? Or move? No.
Oh, it's pretty good spot.
No.
I'm just wondering what we know about possible locations for the Liberty system. Possibility.
Oh, okay. That was talking about. Park.
No, I think. More carefully into the system, where would it go?
That's.
Where could it go? Or, where could it go? Where can it not? If we can really open possibility. Involve maintenance. Right, yeah, this is pretty awful. You make the case for a draft and policy because. If you want to go on top of it, probably. Okay.
No, so I was gonna mention that, we did not go past. Valley. For workable land. Will have to be the test. Oh, perfect.
Well.
Window, like.
It doesn't mention both on field.
Field?
Alpine field.
Yeah, that's over to the left down here. But go up further to the front, you get all that way down through there. And, you know, you can improve slight for soccer field. Do anything down.
So the more, well, probably might be still, because it is the cost. Delivery. Closer to. Arguably, the reader not.
Oh, sure, but there's no land.
No, but no, we do, you have the baseball field you're talking about, the one right behind Grafton Mark, is right here, right? If you're talking about, no one consider that, they don't like it.
I don't know if that would be. Maybe put it inside.
But certainly, one of the first questions, you gotta find out. Whether or not. They are, in this system. Really, then. Really, look. The other thing we find out is that. Whether or not. What. What is.
Right. And then where does it fit in? Where does that little living entity fit in to help create a, really space for come on, right?
With the living system, does that need?
Well, that's where Hannah comes in. She talks about how she takes an area that is wet. And maybe he told me about a pond that's included by the owner, own septic system. She kind of went into the living garden, living water garden. And those plants are supporting those nitrate, phosphate, and other nasty things. And there's lots of microorganisms activity going on.
For Oakland and, Hyundai.
Well, Hannah's gonna be limited, she's never, it'd be more Whitney,
But he was on that.
no, he's with, David. I think that's for David Whitley, Eco Solutions, Seinfeld.
Is that what their system?
Yes, he goes,
Okay, so they're competing with the system.
Hannah's more supportive with her information.
But I mean, they're two different companies.
Yes.
Okay.
Hannah's with her own company that is on the consultants.
See what they can add, and I don't think we can. Come up with anything. Really, huh? What do you- really, at this point, it's just offer. I think we need to go.
Well, I know what time bond rate is gonna be. Well, it's all based on what you can. Be more specific with that,
They will show
now,
us.
that's where they're gonna see you go over 90%. Yeah, how big is Montgomery?
He's got a switch smaller. But with the. I'm a big fan. It's fine. With that area. Oh, take their profile. Yeah, that used to be, Bill Chapman. Yeah, I don't know who it was back then, but. Yeah, they collectively. Site that they thought might work, we just said yes. None of them, people said no, never want to go there. That's good.
Happy to have a question?
Did you have a question? You're
Yeah,
muted.
No, I'm just gonna, I'm gonna say goodnight. I'm just having a hard time hearing everybody. It keeps fading in and out, so,
We usually got a different system. This is ridiculous. If we have guests or public coming on, they can hear us, they're not gonna come.
It was,
I-
no, we can-
I asked, we have a select board meeting on, next Monday, and I'm just gonna, put it to the board that we have to do something with the audio here for the Zoom and for the town hall, because people, I mean, I couldn't hear you, and I know more people would come to these meetings if they could hear. So I'm just gonna put it on the agenda.
Yeah, thank you.
You know,
So-
that could be things the planning commission spends part of what's really important. Very helpful. Yeah,
Did you hear that? We're use part of our plan commission budget to improve the system in the building.
Yeah. That might help.
That's what 2 years ago, we could prove from what it was, we had nothing.
Right,
We didn't have internet connectivity.
right.
But we just have internet now and, we're game, but it's a slow process. It's sort of moving across the street. Thanks, Kathy, for joining us.
Yeah, thank you. Have a good
Rob-
night, everybody.
Rob was good.
Yeah, very good.
Yeah.
Gives you a lot to think about. But
Yeah.
thank you. Have a good night.
Yep, night.
Thank you.
It's no public time.